In a new book to be published next week titled Lucky, How Joe Biden Barely Won the Presidency, it's by Jonathan Allen and Amy Parnes, it is revealed that Biden campaign strategist Anita Dunn said, quote, "COVID is the best thing that ever happened to Biden." In the same week, the United States has, of course, passed 500,000 COVID deaths.
So Democratic strategist Andrew Feldman and culture reporter at The Federalist, Emily Jasinski, they join us now to discuss. Andrew, let me start with you. Obviously, it's a crass way to say it. I don't know if it was said out loud or if it was said in private quarters, but it's obviously true. And so how do you assess that? Which is that at one hand, Joe Biden, he won the more votes than anybody else who's ever run for the presidency. On the other, he only won it technically by 45,000 votes across 3 different states, which is a tighter margin than Trump won the presidency in 2016. How are you thinking about Biden's victory, quote unquote, and assessing it in terms of how things need to go the next time around?
Look, I do think that it was a true statement. And the reason for that was because of the way Donald Trump handled the response to COVID-19. Now, it could have been a completely different scenario had Donald Trump actually acted like a president, acted like someone with moral character, and done the things he needed to do to prevent us from ever getting to 500,000 deaths. That was on Donald Trump's watch, and that could have happened. Now, look, with Joe Biden, I think it was a decisive victory, no doubt about it. And I think that we're seeing it was a decisive victory now with the polling when you look at even Republicans in large numbers supporting his plan for $1.9 trillion in COVID relief. And I think he's off to a really strong start. Now, look, obviously, you can't predict how everything's going to go. You can't predict how a campaign's going to go. So was it a good comment by Anita Dunn to come out? But I agree with you, Saga. Absolutely true.
Yeah. What do you think, Emily? Because, it is obviously extraordinarily crass. But look, I think without COVID, Trump would have gotten reelected. It was so close in these key states, 40,000 votes over a few key swing states in spite of all of the horribleness and manifest incompetence and ugliness and everything of the Trump era. He was probably going to get reelected without completely, wildly, egregiously, not only bungling the COVID response, but lying about it and getting caught. That's what it took for him to very narrowly lose.
Right. But that's, not only is that completely accurate, it's also really important to remember. And I think Dunn's comment, if it's accurate, is a rare flash of reality from the Democratic establishment, because it's really easy for them to fall into these silly patterns of venerating Joe Biden, because there was so much strife after the election, because there has been so much conversation and debate and conflict about what happened in the election. It's really easy for them to forget that he barely squeaked this out against a pretty weak incumbent, and that he's not sort of this broad unifying figure. Actually, he barely won the election, and with a kind of a layup, frankly. So no, I think it's not only is this totally true, it's also really important for the Democratic establishment to understand, because they've been sort of working in concert with media to venerate Joe Biden and to make him seem like he's this massive victor over Trumpism, and it's really not the case.
This is the thing I keep coming back to, Andrew, and I talk about this a lot here, which is that without COVID, January 2020, Republican Party identification was at the highest point in modern history, over 50 for the first time in a long time. So this actually showed that basically the Democratic strategy up until that point in order to unseat Trump and what would have occurred without COVID was not working. It was actually a dramatic failure. All of that was based upon Russiagate, mostly, upon identity concerns and more, and an media opposition. So do you think that that is a lesson to be learned, that it took a global pandemic in order to barely defeat Trump? And it seems that in terms of opposition, if Trump does run again or whoever comes up against him, what lessons are to be learned from that January 2020 experience?
Look, this is all about getting results. We need to get results for the American people. We need to hear them. There are too many people struggling right now. Too many people that aren't able to make ends meet, too many people without health insurance, too many people with living in poverty. And we need to hear what they're calling for. If we can get results for the American people, that is what we are going to run on. That is what we need to get across, because right now, the Republicans are doing nothing to get results for the American people. They are continuing to diffuse the flames of different information, and just look at Ted Cruz, look at Josh Hawley on the insurrection. I mean, the reality is we can't go back and ask ourselves what if. But what we can do now is get results for the American people and build up a party that develops an actual brand. We need to do that. And I was impressed with the hires that they made at the Democratic National Committee. And it looks like we're going to put the resources into the party that we need to actually build it so we're ready for 2 years from now and 4 years from now.
Emily, part of why this book is noteworthy, this is the first sort of like Biden campaign, deep dive from, this is like the equivalent of Game Change this time around. Jonathan Allen, Amy Parnes actually works here, both of them fantastic journalists and reporters. The other interesting nugget that came out in The Guardian is how Barack Obama saw Joe Biden. And they report that Obama first seemed to be enamored with a former Texas congressman, Beto O'Rourke, and that they later told Biden's aides that he feared his friend, age 77 when the primary began, would only succeed in embarrassing himself and tarnishing a distinguished Washington career. So to your point, I think that there is some reality-based thinking around Biden. At the same time, a lot of the reporting previously about the way that the Obama people looked down at Biden, and because he didn't have like the same Ivy League credentials and like, whatever intellectual sophistry at his disposal, he had this sort of like old school style of politics was why they looked down on him, which actually made me like him more.
Yeah, and this is another really a thing that's been easy for Democrats to forget. Not only was Obama kind of right that there's this real chance that Biden would embarrass himself and tarnish his legacy. He came really close to that happening. I mean, this election was decisive, but Donald Trump almost he came really closer than a lot of people in the media felt that he would. And I think part of that goes to Sagar's question, which is that are Democrats really reckoning with the forces that nudged Trump to the front of our politics back in 2015 and in 2016? I think the answer to that is no. And I think the fact that because there was so much strife after this election and conflict after this election, that the media and Democrats venerated Biden, I think that's actually helping the Democrats to forget that they need to learn those lessons anyway. It's sort of like allowing everybody to just gloss over it. Biden got the Obama gang back together. That's something that also is endearing him once again to the Democratic Party. So no, I mean, I think Democrats are not learning the lessons that they needed to learn, and I think they're continuing to be distracted by this sort of veneration of Biden.
It's an interesting question. Okay, guys, stick with us. We're going to be back right next with Team Rising.